All right, good morning, everybody. It is 9 a.m. on Tuesday, March 31st, 2020, and we want to welcome everybody that's joining us online this morning for the Board of Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District. This is a new type of meeting for us, so please bear with us if there are any challenges today. Most of you that are joining us online via Zoom meeting based upon the COVID-19 health crisis that we are currently experiencing. This has been kind of a challenge, but please, as I said, please bear with us. We will try to address public comments and all of our technical difficulties as we move through the meeting. So with that, I'm going to take us to a brief salute of the flag. And I will have our chief lead us in that salute to the flag, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, Madam Clerk, can I get a roll call, please?
Bob Lucy, Chair.
Here.
Marcia Burkbigler, Vice Chair.
Here.
Kitty Jung.
Present.
Via telephone, I will note for the record. Von Hartung.
Present in the chamber.
Jeannie Herman.
Here.
Fire Chief Charles Moore.
Here.
Deputy District Attorney, also via phone, Nate Edwards.
Yes, present.
Thank you. I'm Nancy Parent. You have a quorum, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. All right, so this is public comment, and if you have public comment on any items in this, Chief, would you read the public comment item for us?
Item 3 is public comment. Comment heard under this item will be limited to 3 minutes per person and may pertain to matters both on and off the Board of Fire Commissioners' agenda. This district will also hear public comment during individual action items with comment limited to 3 minutes per person. Comments are to be made to the Board of Fire Commissioners as a whole.
Okay, and for those individuals that are joining us on the Zoom meeting, if you would like to add public comment, please raise your hand on the icon on the bottom, and we will put you through to a live feed.
Mr. Chair, while we're waiting for them to raise their hand, I do have one email public comment if you'd like me to read it into the record.
Please, Madam Clerk, will you read that item into the record?
And this will be timed for 3 minutes. This email was received late yesterday afternoon, March 30th at 4:33 p.m. from Darcy Fletcher. It's public comment. Oh, excuse me. This is on number 10. Sorry.
Okay.
Excuse me.
Okay, so we'll hold that for number 10. Thank you, Madam Clerk. So I do have one individual signed in. I have Mr. Cliff Lowe. So we will release Mr. Cliff Lowe. Mr. Lowe, we will start your time. Go ahead. You are free to speak, Mr. Lowe.
Good morning, Commissioners. I guess I'm the guinea pig for this process. I hope my public comment today does not lead anyone to think I'm insensitive to the COVID-19 crisis that the region and our country faces, because I am sensitive to that critical issue. But there are issues on today's agenda that are unrelated to COVID-19. And during the course of today's meeting, I hope that a question gets answered. And I hope at least part of that answer comes from Mr. Edwards, I believe his title is Deputy District Attorney. What that question surrounds is, what is the authority of Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District to make expenditures that have not been authorized or approved by the fire commissioners in an agendized open meeting? Where does that authority originate? Is it by act of the legislature, through Nevada revised statutes? Is it through some general authority granted by the fire commissioners in an open meeting? What are the circumstances under which those expenditures are permitted? Must those expenditures be during an emergency? Is there a dollar limit on these kinds of expenditures? For example, at the February meeting, there was an extensive presentation for a new logo. That presentation indicated that 11 people were on the logo working group. Without getting into the merits of spending the time and money on a new logo, so far I've been unable to find where convening such a working group was agendized and approved. On the other hand, item 9 on the agenda for the original March meeting, which was rescheduled for today and for an abbreviated agenda. Included on that was an item seeking approval to utilize approximately 24 hours of staff time to perform an in-depth account on staffing with an estimate to cost $2,200. So that required a separate agenda item. I haven't seen a separate agenda items for other expenditures that have been made. Today, on today's agenda, among other things, is the land for a new fire station. And I'll have some comments on that when that agenda item comes up. And that completes my public comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lowe. All right, I do have DJ Fletcher signed in next. And so we will release Mr. Fletcher's mute. Mr. Fletcher, you are now live. Go ahead, Mr. Fletcher.
This is Mrs. Darcy Fletcher, and I have a comment from the minutes that you are getting ready to approve, but I don't know if I'm out of line with speaking to it now, from the February meeting. It was mentioned that when I brought up my comment regarding the securing of the piece of land for this new consolidated fire station in Washoe Valley, it was stated in the minutes that I brought up this inquiry about the piece of land being put into escrow. And it was said that you couldn't answer my questions during public comment, but staff would get together with her, after the meeting regarding her statements. And I was never met with regarding those statements. So that's what I'm bringing up at this point. And that's the end of my public comment on that.
Thank you, Ms. Fletcher. Seeing no further public comment, we have signed in at this time. I will ask one last time before we close public comment. Seeing none from our operators, we'll close public comment and bring it back to the board. Madam Clerk, is there any further public comment that you have emailed in?
Not on this item, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. All right, we're on to item 4, our consent agenda. Mr. Chief.
Item 4 is consent items. Item A is a recommendation to approve the meeting minutes, and item B is a recommendation to approve the retention of our auditors.
Okay. Looking for.
Move approval.
Okay, I have a motion from Commissioner Bergbiegler, Madam Vice Chair, second from Commissioner Hartung. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed. Motion carries unanimously with Commissioner Jung voting in the affirmative from the phone. All right, we are on to item 5. Mr. Chief Moore.
Item 5 is a recommendation to approve a settlement agreement between Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District and IAFF Local 2487 to pay an amount not to exceed $450,000, which represents a flat percentage of earnings due and which continue to accrue in accordance with the collective bargaining agreement for the non-supervisor group dated 2018 to 2019 and 2019 to 2022, and the supervisory group dated 2019 to 2022. Mr. Chairman, this item was reviewed with the board in closed session. It really is a settlement based on what the district and the labor agreement agreed to, but through complications of our limitations of our software, we simply cannot go backwards in time and calculate the amounts correctly. So what this is a proposal to the union to give them their amounts in a flat percentage plus their interest that's accrued per NRS. And the union has agreed to this, and district staff is recommending approval.
All right, thank you, Chief. Is there any discussion from any of the commissioners on this item? All right. Commissioner Jung, do you have any comments?
I do not. Thank you very much.
All right.
We've been educated on it, and I think when you owe people money, give it to them.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Jung. All right, looking for a motion at this time.
So moved.
I have a motion from Commissioner Hartung. Second from Vice Chair Bergbiegler. Do we have any public comment on the item, Madam Clerk?
No, we do not.
And do we have any public comment in the on the Zoom meeting? Seeing no further public comment, we'll bring it back to the board for the vote. I have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Please affirm your vote on the screens for those here in the chambers. Motion carries unanimously with all commissioners voting. All right, we are on to item 6. Chief Moore.
Item 6 is a recommendation to approve an interlocal agreement between Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District and Washoe County to provide for possible financing, development, operation, and management of a new regional communications P25 public safety radio system at an estimated cost of $75,743 for fiscal year 2021 operations, plus either a lump sum cost of $822,155 or an estimated level annual payment of $70,430 for 20 years, which equals to a total amount of $1,056,449 for infrastructure construction of the system. This has been in the works for about 2 years now. The current radio system that we have is end of life. The very difficult process of getting parts, if you can even find them, if the system breaks. And this is the new generation of the radio system that will allow all users to communicate statewide and is completely digital and has a life expectancy of probably 20 years. So the staff, and I'm looking for some guidance from the board, the staff before COVID-19 crisis hit was contemplating making the cash payment. Now it might be more prudent to make the finance payments, but nevertheless, the district has almost $9 million in cash in our fund balance right now, and so we believe once we get through our budget process, we'll take a look at where we're at with projections of revenues. But for right now, we believe we could do either. But our crystal ball going into the future, of course, is not quite as clear. So if the board has some advice on whether we should finance or pay a lump sum now, staff would love the guidance. But nevertheless, when we go through the budget process, I think that decision will become a little bit clearer for us.
Okay. Discussion on this item from any of the commissioners. Any questions? Madam Vice Chair.
So I really don't have a strong feeling one way or the other. I think the chief knows what his budget is. He knows the issues he's going to have to be dealing with as far as COVID-19 is concerned. And if it ramps up like they're telling us it will likely ramp up, then, you go either way that you think is the best way to go. So I just, I think we leave these kind of issues usually to the manager who manages them, so.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. Commissioner Hartung.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm a firm believer that cash is king. And if you look at the difference between $1,056,449 versus $822,155, that difference, when you look at it over a 20-year time period, is a little less than $1,000 a month. If we need the cash, then we have to borrow cash. But I think right now, and my question really comes back to the chief. Chief, if we start making the payment now, is there any penalty if, let's just say, next year or the year after, that we have the ability to pay it off in full? Can we do that?
I don't believe we have the option to do that. The county needs a decision because the county is financing this system in totality. So the county needs a commitment whether or not we're paying cash up front or we're going to finance it over the term. I don't believe we have the option midway or some way into the future to say, okay, now we want to pay the balance off and
Really?
save.
I mean, like a mortgage or a car payment, at any time I can call in and ask for a payoff and they'll pay it off.
I'll ask Cindy Vance to come up and perhaps she has the question of that. But as that was explained to me, I'm not sure that we have that ability to do.
Whoa.
Well, so Sandy, hold on one second. Hold on.
How do we, yeah. Can we get her a mic over there? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm sorry, I don't mean to be pedantic, but.
Is it on? Okay. Cindy Vance, Chief Fiscal Officer, for the record. We did meet with the county, and Chief is right. We need to give them a notice as of as of, I think, June 30th, of whether we're going to pay it as a lump sum or make payments, because they're going to borrow the money, and they may not be able to call in on the debt. So they did allow everybody with the different entities that are participating in this purchase to go through the budget process to determine, to let them know whether we would make a lump sum payment or finance it.
Thank you, Ms. Vance.
Okay.
Mr. Brown, could you come up really quick, that we had, since we have you in the auditorium, and maybe you could help out a little bit with this as well. I think Commissioner Burke-Bigler was looking for a little bit of direction probably from you as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, Mr. Brown, if ultimately the county is responsible for financing this or paying it in a lump sum, I'd really like to hear what your suggestions or thoughts are.
Eric Brown, Washoe County Manager. I believe the fire district, as well as the other agencies, he's right, have been given the option of making the upfront payment or taking the payment terms. We have not fully, to my knowledge, fully exhausted what are the early payoff provisions. So for that reason, I don't have an answer to give you about what that involves or what are the trade-offs. That's something we can certainly take a look at. But I think at this point, we were just trying to get, there are so many agencies that are involved in this. We're just trying to get a clear line on whether people would rather pay up front or perhaps take out a payment plan.
Okay.
Is that helpful? Hopefully that's helpful.
Yeah. So commissioners, it's $976 and about 23 cents a month to finance it, or about $11,000 a year, a little more than $11,000 a year. For me personally, this is just me. Cash is king. We may need that cash, and so. I have the ability to pay off a number, like my automobile, I can pay it off now, but I'd rather have the liquidity just in case. So that would be, I'll acquiesce to whatever the board decides, but those are my comments.
Thank you, Commissioner Hartung. Commissioner Herman, do you have anything on this item?
I'd kind of like to hear from the chief what she thinks and feels would work the best.
Okay. All right. And then Commissioner Jung, I'm going to go to you next. Do you have any comments or would like to weigh in on this one way or the other?
I have a question for our legal counsel. And that is, in worst case scenario, should the Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District hold, who is the fiduciary that is responsible for them upon the collapse?
Mr. Edwards, can you hear that? Did you hear that, Commissioner Jung's questions?
Yes, and the question was if the fire protection district folds, as in is no longer in existence because of fiscal collapse or something like that?
That's exactly.
Yeah. Well, that's an interesting question. I think it's the kind of thing that I would want to do some research on, but I think I do have an answer for you, like a provisional answer that I'll give right now. And generally, in those kind of situations, you're looking at either the state or the federal government providing some kind of backing. The Fire Protection District is a political subdivision of the state of Nevada. I wouldn't assume that it would be automatic that the state would step in that situation or be put into that position, by legal proceedings or something like that. However, if a political subdivision of the larger unit fails, I think there's a likely outcome would be that the state would end up having to answer for that political subdivision. Now, I give that answer provisionally because that's a pretty broad question, and it may have different facets to it, such as, why did the political subdivision cease to exist? Why did it fail? Those types of things, and that may sort of steer the answer a little bit. But I think generally speaking, because it's a political subdivision by statute, by state law, that the state would end up having some responsibility for that. But that's as good of an answer as I can give you off the hip here today.
Okay, well, this is for the indulgence of the commission. That's not the way I've been explaining that for 12 and a half years. So maybe I had a wrong opinion. What I was trying to drive at is the fact that, for instance, if REMSA folds, the district health is responsible, and we're ultimately responsible for the district health. And that's why we've allowed that their reserves are so small, because I had always assumed per legal that we would absorb them. So the reason why they didn't have to carry as much bandwidth, let's say for us, for rainy day funds, is because we were their rainy day fund. So I was just trying to get that clarified. I don't think it matters either way to me that Mr. Edwards can get that back to us. And I'd like that for everything again, so we can all see it, who we're actually responsible for. But I'm with agreement with Commissioner Hartung and the Vice Chairwoman Burkbigler in that we do trust the subject matter expert, Ms. Vance, to make this decision, but they are coming to us saying, pick your poison. And I agree with Commissioner Hartung. I'd rather have cash on hand because I don't want them relying on us at this point when we know we're going to blow through our reserves in this emergency. So I go for choice A, finance it for the time being, and who cares if we have to get a prepayment penalty. But at this point, it's nickel and diming. So, but the overall philosophy that I'm coming from, I would like a district attorney's opinion and information on who do we oversee and whom do we automatically absorb. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Jung. And so I'll chime in here as well. I do believe that Commissioner Hartung and Commissioner Jung and the Vice Chair obviously have a sound argument in regards to financing the P25 radios. I think that any cash we can keep on hand in regards to this current emergency and what we're seeing currently and what we have not seen yet in the upcoming days and months ahead, I think we need to be a little bit more conservative about how we do that, and knowing that this infrastructure is in great need of replacement and soon, and we've moved this far down the road. I believe finance is the smartest option to make sure that we can maintain our fiscal solvency and yet be able to continue with these projects and move these things forward so that when we do, and I promise you we will recover from this, but when we do recover, we have the infrastructure in place for our first responders for the foreseeable future. So my vote would be, and I could even put this in the form of a motion, that we move forward with the financing of this P25 public safety radio system bond with Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District and Washoe County, and pursue a financing option versus a cash option.
Second.
So I have a motion from myself, a second from Commissioner Hartung. I will call for public comment. Is there any public comment?
I have no public comment on this item.
I'm looking at my operators. Any public comment? Seeing no public comment, bring it back to the board. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 And please mark your screens. Thank you.
Please affirm your votes. All votes pass with Commissioner Jung voting in the affirmative on the phone. All right, we are on to item 7. Mr. Chief Moore.
Item 7 is a recommendation to approve and create 3 additional grant-funded fuels crew member positions with a salary range of $40,768 to $52,915 with regular NV-PERS, pending NV-PERS review, and possible police fire PERS. Mr. Chairman, this is a housekeeping item. This was before the board, I think a month or two ago. There was a grammatical error in the staff report where we reported the number of positions in the singular rather than the plural. However, this proposal is purely grant funded, so unless we get the grant from NV Energy, we would not move forward. So there's really no cost to the district. The staff report simply clarifies the numbers of staff that we intend to fund through the grant.
Okay, great. Any questions by any of the commissioners on this item?
Motion to approve.
All right, I have a motion to approve from Commissioner Hartung, second from Vice Chair Burke-Bigler. All those in favor signify by saying, is there any public comment?
I have none, Mr. Chair.
Any public comment? Seeing no public comment from the public, we will bring back to the board. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Please affirm your votes on their screens. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. All right, Chief, we are on to item 8, please.
Item 8 is a recommendation authorizing the chief of the Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District to execute a contract for the purchase of 3 Type 5 fire engines in total combined amount not to exceed $750,000 for use by TMFPD in conjunction with its fire protection district duties. The contract was put out to bid by the Washoe County Purchasing Department in February 2020, with bids reviewed on March 17th, 2020. Authorization to the chief to execute the contract would include ratification of the bidding process that was undertaken and would furthermore authorize the chief to select the lowest responsible bidder from among those who have submitted bids for the sale. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is actually a continuation of the bond that the board previously approved. Board may recall that we are financing Type 1 structural fire engines as well as these wildland engines. The board has approved all that process, so this is just simply rounding out the rest of that bond expenditure.
Great, thanks, Chief. All right, commissioners, is there any discussion from any of the commissioners or questions in regards to this item? I have a motion from Vice Chair Burke-Bigler. I have a second from Commissioner Herman. Is there public comment on this item? Seeing no public comment, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Madam Clerk, I had the seconder as showing up on none on my screen, but you did get the seconder as Commissioner Herman?
We did.
Okay,
Thank
thank
you.
you. All right. All right, we are on to item 9. Chief.
Item 9 is a recommendation to adopt a resolution of intent proposing the issuance of and authorizing the publication of notices relating to general obligation limited tax capital improvement bonds additionally secured by pledged revenues in the maximum principal amount of $2.1 million to defray wholly or in part the cost of acquisition of properties for stations authorized by NRS 474.5511, including fixtures, structures, stations, other buildings, and sites thereof, and appurtenances and incidentals necessary, useful, or desirable for any such facilities, including all types of property thereof, providing the manner, form, and contents of the notices thereof, providing other matters properly related thereto, and providing the effective date thereof. The proposal to issue these bonds was approved by the Washoe County Debt Management Commission per NRS 350.014 on February 28th, 2020. We do have John Peterson on Zoom if there are any questions about this. This is really a authorization to proceed with publication of the bonds. These bonds are intended for the rebuild of Station 37 in Hidden Valley. And so there will be a 90-day waiting period before these bonds can be issued and before we could use the proceeds for the construction of a new Station 37 in Hidden Valley.
Okay. Are there any questions by Commissioner Hartung?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And we probably can't answer this, but if we look at the fiscal impact, this is the payback on these bonds is a 20-year time period, which I do like. But there's a little uncertainty in the bond market right now, Chief, and I don't know what happens if we put these bonds out. I mean, do we know what the interest rate would be on these bonds? Are they going to be attractive? I know municipal bonds are always attractive because there's a dedicated funding source, but it's an interesting market right now. And so what would be the timing of the sale of those bonds? Would that be sometime in the fall, sometime next spring, or do we know?
But they couldn't happen for at least 90 days.
Okay.
And then we could evaluate the interest rate, and then the board or staff could bring that back to the board. I don't know if, Cindy, if there's another step involved, but I'll ask John Peterson, since he's on Zoom, if he could perhaps answer that question for you, Mr. Hartung.
Sure. Commissioner Hartung, can you hear me?
I can, thank you, sir.
Wonderful, thank you. For the record, this is John Peterson with J&A Consulting Group. To your question, and Chief Moore is right, this is the start of a process where, we have a 90-day period before the bonds can be issued. And so in that 90-day period, one of the steps that we'll take is that a public hearing will be held by the board, likely at the meeting in May, and a bond resolution would come to the board once that 90-day period is complete, likely in July. So that's really the timing. That's the soonest that we could go. But to talk a little bit more about the market factors, and you're absolutely correct. The market just has been unpredictable, I think is the kindest way I can describe it over the last couple of weeks. But with the passage of the CARES Act last week by Congress, it seems to have somewhat tempered down in terms of the volatility. So we are seeing where folks are fleeing the market in the last couple of weeks, they are starting to come back. But obviously, who knows what the market will bring us over the next 3 months as we head into July. In our presentation to the Debt Management Commission in February, the interest rate that we estimated for them was a 3.75%. My expectation today is that if we were to bid this out, we would be much below that. I think we would be much closer to 3.25% or even 3% flat. But obviously that's today, that's not July. And if the market is still in a bad place in July, then we can reevaluate what we want to do at that point and possibly delay the bond. We have up to 3 years.
Oh, that's great. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any further questions? Commissioner Jung, do you have any questions on this?
Yes, I believe that I would like to make a motion to approve this with a update prior to release in July.
Second.
I have a motion from Commissioner Jung, seconded by Commissioner Hartung. Is there any public comment on this item?
No, sir.
Any public comment from the operator? Nope. Seeing none. All right. I have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed, no. Motion carries unanimously. All right, Chief, we are on to item 10.
Item 10 is a recommendation to approve a purchase and sale agreement for the acquisition by the district of a 6-acre parcel located at 0 White Pelican, APN 050-220-61, for the purpose of constructing a new fire station, which is planned for additional buildings that would include a fixed-based ambulance building, a helipad, and a Washoe County Sheriff's substation to serve the Washoe Valley area in an amount not to exceed $475,000 plus closing costs, less $5,000 in an earnest money deposit, and authorize the chair to execute all checks, warrants, deeds, and instruments as needed to effect this purchase, and close escrow as authorized by NRS 474.470. If approved, approve and execute a resolution augmenting the Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District Capital Fund capital outlay account from the Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District Capital Fund beginning fund balance in the amount of $475,000. The board may recall that this is the consolidation of the East Lake Fire Station and Bowers. There are a few options for the district to actually do that, and in fact, this is the best location that we found that would meet response time objectives. This has been put under contract at no financial risk to the district. And in fact, if the board does not approve this, then the district recovers its $5,000 of earnest money and the deal doesn't happen. Nevertheless, again, our options are fairly limited with respect to doing this. Going forward into the future, we anticipate that the East Lake Fire Station could become a new volunteer fire station for us. We have lots of options for Bowers. We have the need for a headquarters for a fuels crew, which Bowers, again, is fairly dilapidated, so I just want to throw that out there as it might be a location for that fuels crew to work. But nevertheless, this would, upon approval of the board, this would close in early April, and we would consider either starting the design work or postponing the design work based on what we see the economic forecasts would be. But to secure this piece of ground is important to ever get that project going at either in the short term or the long term.
Okay. All right, Chief. Vice Chair Burke-Bigler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chief, either you or Mr. Edwards, could you answer Cliff Lowe's question, just so it's clear to the public that, I know Cliff asked what's the legal authority for the chief to make this commitment without coming to us first. So if there's some statutory language, I don't know, maybe legal language, maybe Mr. Edwards, Nate Edwards, needs to answer the question. But just so that the public is aware, the question was asked, and I think it's a good idea for the public to be aware.
Yes, and I actually received an email from Mr. Edwards. So, Mr. Nate, if you'll add to that for the Vice Chair, please.
Yes. So in June of 2019, the Board of Fire Commissioners passed a standing resolution that gave purchasing authority to the chief or his designee, akin to that authority that resides in the office of the Purchasing and Contracts Manager in Washoe County under Washoe County Code, Chapter 15.495. It includes a $100,000 cutoff. Below that mark, the chief or designee can make expenditures for the conduct, as it were, of district business. Above that mark requires an item to be brought into the Board of Fire Commissioners for specific approval. And so that was the way that was handled, to allow the district to have the ability to make expenditures on lower level items without having to come to the Board of Fire Commissioners for particular approval. With respect to entering into a contract on a larger item, an expenditure up front, like an earnest money deposit, was below the threshold amount. And I think the chief can provide some insight too into how he proceeded, with respect to this process. But the contract overall for the full purchase price and those kinds of things is subject to Board of Fire Commissioners approval. So there is no expenditure or even contract until it's approved by the Board of Fire Commissioners. So that's the gist of the framework that's involved.
Thank you, Mr. Edwards. Madam Vice Chair, does that fulfill your? And to that point, Chief, can you, for the general public, please provide a process in which you were contacted, this property became available, and provide another timeline? This property was under contract previously, is that correct? Then became available once again. You made that quick response at that time, is that correct? Can you kind of give that timeline, please?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. When we became interested in moving forward with this consolidated concept of stations in Washoe Valley, we identified this parcel through our realtor. We again made an offer and found that the property was under contract by a private developer. That property fell out of contract, and then through discussions with you, Mr. Chairman, decided to proceed with a non-binding contract, such as you see in your board packet, that would bring this back to the board for approval. And if it's approved, then only then would the district close on the property.
Thank you, Chief. Absolutely, and that's when Chief contacted me for the discussion of this property. That is exactly what I had asked for, is a non-binding contract with the full authority given to him to bring that back, but that the district not be bound to any financial obligations or contractual obligations until it could be heard in a public meeting by the board. So with that being said, that's why we are here where we are right now. With that being said, before we take more discussion on this, you want to do, Commissioner Hartung.
I just want to get a couple of things on the record. So Chief, this new structure, you mentioned that it would have a heliopad. The public can't see your head shaking.
Yes.
Thank you. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's all new for us, trust me.
It's televised.
And where you're sitting, you're definitely not on camera.
Not on camera. Sorry, Chief. I'm not trying to pick on you. So we'll have a heliopad. And we're also, if memory serves me correctly, we already have an ambulance that we can potentially operate in those south valleys, correct?
That's correct.
So the intent here would be that our ambulance could potentially pick up a patient, and then they could transport them to our station essentially and move them to the correct facility. Is that the idea of having a heliopad?
The idea of a helipad is for critical patients where Flight for Life, Care Flight could land and transport that patient.
Okay.
Those are for circumstances when we have a terrible crash on the interstate. We have perhaps more than one patient, or we have one that needs to get to a trauma surgeon right away. REMSA has given its pledge to build a fixed base on this property, so it would be REMSA that would do the ground transport.
Oh, I see. Okay, nice.
Nevertheless, the ambulance that we have bought, purchased recently, could go anywhere within our system.
Okay, so expound a little bit. So REMSA is actually going to build a fixed base, so they'll actually have a place that they can house an ambulance. Will it contain quarters for those paramedics?
We're pretty early in this process, Commissioner Hartung, that we really haven't gone through any kind of a discussion with either the sheriff or REMSA, other than to say that there's enough room on this site. So if you would refer to your board packets, you can actually see a site concept that we had
I saw that.
an architect just verify that we have enough room for a fire station, for a helipad, for REMSA, and for a Washoe County substation. And we can get all that stuff on 6 acres. So how that actually, what REMSA's program is for the building, or what the sheriff's program for the building is yet to be determined, but we just took some guesses and laid it out on the site to make sure that it all fits and would work.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, so what I'm going to do, seeing no further, Commissioner Jung, do you have any further questions at this time before I go to public comment?
No, thank you.
Okay, I'm going to go to public comment at this time. I currently have Mr. Cliff Lowe signed in, so I'm going to ask the operators to unmute Mr. Lowe's speaker. Mr. Lowe, you have 3 minutes. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And for the record, Cliff Lowe, Washoe Valley, I would like to sincerely thank the commission and Mr. Edwards, the Deputy District Attorney, for that explanation of the spending that was done toward the purchase of the land for the fire station in Washoe Valley. I would hope you would all agree with me that in hindsight, some sort of disclosure of what was taking place along the way would have been preferable, because certainly speaking for myself, and I think for many other people in Washoe Valley, the perception was that decisions had already been made in spite of the public meetings that were taking place, and decisions had already been made by the commissioners prior to the discussion that took place at the January Board of Fire Commissioners meeting, which did not even consider the purchase of the land. But it is a relief to learn that the authority was there pretty explicitly. I would ask all of you to listen very carefully to what I'm about to tell you before you take your motion on this item. To avoid a problem, please be aware that the way this is worded, is that you would be paying $475,000 for a single lot, the APN ending with 61. That lot is only 1 acre. The agenda item that was in September meeting identified 6 lots. which make up a combined amount of approximately 6 acres. And I do believe that that is what you want to approve. Regardless, I don't remember exactly whether the contract itself, the land purchase agreement, states just the one APN, but I don't think you want to spend $475,000 or commit $475,000 for 1 acre when you've determined that you need 6. That ends my public comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lowe. Is there any further public comment on this item?
Mr. Chair, I do have an email public comment from Darcy Fletcher.
Okay, Madam Clerk, will you please read that into the record at this time?
This was received by Washoe 311 yesterday afternoon at 4:33 p.m. regarding item number 10, land agreement consolidation for fire stations of 30 and 32. Chief Moore has exceeded his authority in getting into a purchase agreement for land in Washoe Valley. Chief Moore has decided to combine 2 fire stations into one in Washoe Valley, under the guise of saving money and balancing first responder service between southern district areas and northern district areas. Research from TMFPD has found that the majority of 911 calls in the north areas are of a medical nature. This was confirmed with a conversation I had with the battalion chief at station number 45 last month. I was told that many north area residents use 911 as their primary health source. The battalion chief said to me, quote, when people in your area, parens Washoe Valley, and parens get sick, you call your doctor. When people in this area, parens north, and parens get sick, they don't seek care, and when it gets worse, they call us. Chief Moore has reassured us in the South that REMSA has committed to establishing a paramedic ambulance at the new station once it's built. This is supposed to comfort us. This commitment is not written in stone, and after more research, it has been found out that REMSA uses an algorithm that circulates emergency vehicles and they don't stand still, so there is no guarantee that an emergency vehicle will be at the ready in the South area. The research has shown that the north areas are in more need of medical response, so the obvious solution is to have REMSA based up there and not in the South. Why compromise the safety of the citizens in the South who have unique geographical conditions, a body of water between the existing fire stations, when there is an immediate solution right now for the North? Even Mr. Lucy agrees. Quote, my idea to rob Peter to pay Paul is really not the answer, so we really need to go back, do some more citizen research, work with the community, and try to find a better solution, end quote, Lucy said, September 17th, 2019. Another stark reality with REMSA and an unfair balance that the southern area residents will need to endure is their billing practices. We in the South already pay taxes for emergency services. If you have to depend on REMSA for services, we get billed again through insurance. And guess what? Thanks to Obamacare, a lot of us are using a high deductible, catastrophic insurance, which means the REMSA bill will come straight out of our pocket until that high deductible is met. To me, that's a huge salt in the wound, slap in the face, because we are responsible citizens. Stop the consolidation of 30 and 32, put the resources needed in the North, now REMSA, that takes care of the issue without jeopardizing those of us in the South and making us pay more. With gratitude, Darcy Fletcher, and she provides her phone number for the board.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Are there any further email and public comment?
No, sir.
Operators, are there any further? Okay, seeing no further public comment, I'll bring it back to the board. Chief, based upon Mr. Lowe's discussion, that I am looking at the land purchase agreement that's between our agent and an agent at Chase Real Estate. They do list the property situated at 0 White Pelican, and they do list it as consisting of approximately 6 acres, commonly known as APN 050220-61, which is only one, though, based upon the engineering parameters that have been provided to us and the site inspection through Colliers, that is only one of the 6 parcels that I believe that is included in this purchase. Now, this is just an offer, a land purchase agreement, and will change, but I do want to make sure that we will affirm that all 6 of those parcels are included in the sales purchase, the purchase agreement.
It shows on page 2, the Obermeyer design.
Yep.
Chairman, if I may.
Commissioner Hartung.
Thank you. Yeah, when you look on the assessor's website, though, Mr. Lowe is absolutely correct that that APN number, 050-220-61, which is public record, owned by the Gallagher Trust, it consists only of 1 acre. So there's a little, and I don't know whether there's just a discrepancy in the staff report, and there's actually
Well,
6 acres included in this, and the APNs are just, the additional APNs are not included.
In my opinion, the land purchase agreement is drafted inappropriately. If all 6 APNs should be listed, this, in my experience, and
Yes.
Commissioner Herman, your experience also in real estate, all of the APNs should be listed in the land purchase agreement if they are to be considered as purchase. So in my opinion, the land purchase agreement needs to be amended. We do have an addendum in here, but I would proffer that we have another addendum that reflects the purchase of all APNs that would start 050-220-61 through -66 in an addendum. Chief.
Understood.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Hartung.
Thank you. For legal, Mr. Edwards, can we give the chief authority to update the land purchase agreement to include all of the parcels so that the purchase is for an entire 6 acres, not just the 1 acre, without coming back to the board?
Give me a second. I'm looking at the assessor's page that you referenced as well, in light of Mr. Lowe's comment. You know, the agenda item is for to approve a purchase and sale agreement for acquisition by the district of a 6-acre parcel located at 0 White Pelican. It states an APN number, which the assessor shows to be approximately a 1-acre parcel. And if I'm hearing you correctly, there's 061 through 066 are all 6 of the acres.
That's correct.
Yeah.
It is my opinion, doing these purchase agreements, that an addendum could be executed by the chief with the authority of the board that would reflect through the negotiation, through the escrow period, that would reflect all of the APNs in regards to the purchase, that would reflect the initial land purchase agreement of the 6 acres to make the correction on the APN in that first section. We've done
Right. Let me give me just a second here. If you have anything else you all want to discuss for a second, I'm checking another piece of info on the assessor's website. So if you could give me just a second on that, I'd appreciate it.
Chief, when was this? Do we have any follow-up recordation from the county recorder that when this piece ever subdivided into these 6 parcels individually? Do we know any of that? Do we have any of that backup documentation somewhere?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, this was initially a 6-acre parcel, and the owner subdivided into 6-acre parcels for the purpose of selling each one as an individual home site.
When was that subdivision done?
I do not recall I don't have the exact date to that, sir, but it would have been a few years ago.
Madam Vice Chair.
So, Chief, are you certain that the intention of this seller of this property was to sell all 6 acres at the $475,000 price?
Yes, quite certain. In fact, the realtor expressed exactly that they did not want to sell individual parcels on this. They wanted to sell the entire 6 acres.
Okay.
So if there is a lapse here, it's just that the purchase and sale agreement does not list all the APNs. The purchase and sale agreement does say 6 acres, and it was the understanding of all parties that it would include all 6 acres and all the lots that were subdivided within that 6
Mr. Chair,
acres.
I'm ready to give my opinion on this
Okay.
question.
District Attorney Edwards, go ahead.
Yes, so the chief is correct that the land purchase agreement is very clearly for 6 acres. It's broken down on a per acre price, which is approximately $79,000 per acre. And so all 6 acres are clearly within the contemplation of the parties. It's signed by the seller as well. But here's the catch. The purchase and sale agreement, which describes it as APN 050226061 and uses the address of 0 White Pelican. I was looking at the assessor's website to see if there was enough information in the agenda item to authorize approval of an addendum to this, because it uses the 0 White Pelican address and also the APN. And you see this sometimes in items on agendas that describe land, where the APNs are off, or because of a typo or something like that, or the address is off because of a typo. And so a lot of times we'll put both of them in there, and we put them both in there for, this kind of a reason. I think that because the 0 White Pelican address and the APN on the assessor's website both show slightly different information, but they both show approximately a 1 acre parcel, that I think you should bring this back and have it list them out specifically, because I don't want you as a board to authorize a purchase of a bunch of acres that are under other APNs that are not in your agenda item. So that's what I think you ought to do. I do think the purchase and sale agreement accurately reflects that it's supposed to be 6 acres, but it uses that APN that has only the single acre in it. And so that could be cleaned up by the realtor in this situation, and I would recommend bringing it back.
Thank you, Mr. Edwards. Commissioner Harting, you had a question.
I do. And unfortunately, they're not paginated, but if you look back under the Construction Materials Engineers, Inc., who is Mr. William H. Hoffman from Pogemeyer Design Group, and you look on their second page under item number 2, project description, it clearly shows all of the APNs 61, 62, 63, 64, 65, and 66. And this is all included in the staff report.
I'm going to take a stab at this based upon my experience in real estate for years that I've been involved. I do think Mr. Edwards has a point. However, I disagree that I don't think that we could approve this today with the ability for giving the chief the ability to sign the addendum that shows the corrected APNs in there, being that we do have enough information from the 6 acres in the land purchase agreement, the signed land purchase agreement that acknowledges the 6 acres and the base price of $79,000 for all of those acreage, plus the additional documentation within our packets from CME and from Pogemeyer and identifying all 6 acres. I don't think there is discrepancy there. I do think we could move forward. It is written in our purchase that we could do that, just as long as the motion reflected the ability for chief to execute the addendum contingent upon those 6 APNs being listed in the addendum of the land purchase agreement.
If that's in the form of a motion, I would second that. I think that's really the approach to go on this.
I would make that.
Realtor.
I make that in the form of a motion. So, second. I have a second from Madam Vice Chair, but I do have comments from Commissioner Herman. Commissioner Herman.
I was just wondering if there was an acceptance date that we'd be going through past.
I'm sure we can get an addendum to state that and revise the whole deal.
What's that? I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. What did you say, Commissioner Herman?
Oh, I just was concerned that maybe there was a time limit on acceptance.
Oh, absolutely too, and allowing and extending the offer period. So I'm sure that they would allow that. So we would make that in the form of a motion, giving you the ability to draft the new addendum, contingent upon the agreement by Gallagher Trust as well.
Because the intent is there.
Yeah, I believe so. All right, I do have a motion and a second on the floor. We have taken public comment. Any further discussion on this item? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Chief, you have your direction.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Item 11 is Commissioners, Fire Chiefs announcements, requests for information, topics for future agendas, and statements relating to items not on the agenda. No discussion among commissioners will take place on this item.
All right. Are there any discussions by any of the commissioners at this time? Commissioner Hartung.
Just a question, Chief, and you can get back to me offline where we are with the Quint.
I'm sorry, my radio was shut that off. Sorry.
Yeah, I just want to know where we are with the ladder truck. And again, you can get to me offline.
Okay.
Thank you.
Commissioner Herman, do you have anything? Commissioner Jung on the phone?
No, thank you.
Madam Vice Chair? All right, seeing none, we are on to our final public comment.
One last thing. I wanted to thank all of the first responders, firefighters, police officers, medical professionals, everyone who's been involved in this pandemic. I want to thank everyone. The Stuff a Bus people. I happened to be part of the group that delivered some of that stuff. They did all the hard work. I had the easy job. There were many, 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 many people involved in that who also did many deliveries, and I just really appreciate all the hard work that's going on right now. This is not an easy scenario for our community, but like the chairman said earlier, we will get through this. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Hartung, and I'd have to share that sentiment. You know, we have so many of our Truckee Meadows Fire Protection Officers, Reno Fire Protection Officers, North Lake Fire Protection Officers, Sparks. They're all participating in our current incident command team that is located at our Regional Emergency Operations Center. These gentlemen are working, and ladies and gentlemen, are working round the clock to address this pandemic and the concern. I can't thank them enough under the lead of Sam Hicks, who's the current incident commander. They are doing, in my opinion, the Lord's work up there. They are really taking on this with every bit of their abilities, from housing to food to making sure our public safety is standing up, our healthcare professionals. I can't thank you enough. Please be safe out there. Please stay home. Do not go out if you do not have to. This pandemic is real. This virus is real, and those frontline responders are the ones that have to go out every day. Please think about them first before you take those risks into your own hands, because those will be the ones that are going to have to answer the call when you get sick. So, with that, I have no further public comments. Madam Vice Chair, do you have anything?
No, just second you and everything you guys had to say, and to ask our first responders to really take care of themselves and make sure they're safe.
Thank you. All right, Commissioner Jung, do you have anything in the last minute?
No, thank you.
Okay. All right, we will move to our final public comment, item 12. Madam Clerk, do I have any public comment?
I have no one that has sent a written email. Do we have anyone?
Do I have public comment from the floor? I do have public comment from the floor. We are loading those in currently. All right. Mr. Cliff Lowe, I have you signed in for final public comment. We are unmuting your mic. Mr. Cliff Lowe, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Cliff Lowe, Washoe Valley. And also for the record, commissioners, I want to be clear that the reason I brought up the APN potential discrepancy was not to try and have this agenda item moved to a subsequent meeting. I was sincere that I simply did not want to see taxpayers' money somehow end up getting spent on a single parcel for 1 acre. So I just want to be clear about that. Also, I suspect you're more accustomed to hearing from me criticism or negativity or things of that nature. And I would like to take this opportunity to compliment the Board of Fire Commissioners, the Board of County Commissioners, the Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District, and also the staff, the county manager and his staff, for the way in which this meeting has taken place. I studied carefully Governor Sisolak's Directive Number 6, which made suspended certain provisions of the open meeting law. And this meeting could have been done very differently. And I compliment the staff on creating and executing a meeting that could be held in a reasonably open manner, and the board in adopting those capabilities and allowing for public comment to be provided live by people of the general public. So kudos to all involved in that. And I also add my kudos to the sentiments expressed by the commissioners about all the people and helping us get through the current situation with COVID-19. To which I would like to add my own comments. I'm not an elected leader. I will not be an elected leader or an appointed leader, but I do want to add, as just a member of the public, do maintain your distance and wash your hands. There are many uncertainties relative to COVID-19. I listened to a knowledgeable person yesterday said scientists are not even sure if somebody who recovers from this will have immunity. So there is the possibility of reinfection. I encourage people not to take the direction to not gather in groups of more than 10 people. Don't take that as an indication that it's just fine to gather in groups of 9 without maintaining distance. And if you're going to be outdoors, extend your distance, enjoy the outdoors, get mentally better. It's good for your physical health as well, but maintain your distance. Rarely has there been a time like this when it's true from literature that no man or woman is an island. We are truly in this all together, and I encourage people to take care of each other. Keep your distance, wash your hands. Thank you, Commissioners.
All right. Do we have any further public comment, Mr. Burr? Seeing none. All right. Thank you very much, everybody. We appreciate you attending with our Zoom meeting today for the Board of Fire Commissioners. We are currently adjourned. Thank you very much.